Okay, that should be good. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to my review of the Paranormal Activity franchise. Today, I have a special gift for you guys, as today I will be having my first double feature of the year, mainly because this is going to have a lot of odd parallels with my double feature that I did with Trevor Boy with Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. Because for both of these movies, I'm just going to bury the lead and just say I don't have very much to say about these two movies. The next two, I'm pretty sure I will have a lot to say. One in particular, a lot that's negative. But um, I really just kind of didn't want to dedicate a solo review to either of these movies because I'm pretty sure as well, no, I think equally they would be just about 40 minutes long a piece. So, and I don't want to do that just because I really just don't have much to say. And because there's a lot of interesting comparisons between these movies, I figure I may as well just talk about both at the same time and just get them out of the way before I move on to the rest of the series. So hello, Texas Guy Movie Reviews. So yeah, today I will be talking about Paranormal Activity 3, released in 2011, and Paranormal Activity 4, released in 2012, in one video. Um, Hopefully this should be fun because I didn't have as much fun watching these movies as I would have hoped. um, so as far as personal history goes, well, hang on. So, Paranormal Activity 3 is a 2011 American found footage supernatural horror film directed by Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman. Henry is a German dude, and Ariel Schulman is an American. Oh, Merrick Ariel Schulman. Oh, so these two have just directed everything together. These guys are both known for directing the 2010 documentary Catfish, and they also directed this movie and Paranormal Activity 4, Nerve, and Project Power. Paranormal Activity 3 is the third, but chronologically the first installment of the Paranormal Activity series, and serves as a prequel mostly set 18 years prior to the events of the first two movies. It was released in theaters October 21st, 2011. The film broke financial records upon release, setting a new record for a midnight opening for a horror film, $8 million, and the best opening day for a horror film in the United States, making 26.2 million. And it made $207 million worldwide against a $5 million budget. Um, oh, okay. Okay, and as for Paranormal Activity 4, is a 2012 American found footage supernatural horror film directed by Ariel Schulman and Henry Joost, and it was written by Christopher Landon from a story by Chad Feehan. Paranormal Activity 3 was also written by Christopher Landon. Uh, Part 4 is specifically a sequel to Paranormal Activity 2, set 5 years after the events of that movie. And the film features Katie Featherston returning as Katie, who starred in the first film and had cameos in 2 and 3. The film was released in theaters October 17th, 2012, and grossed 142 million against a $5 million budget once again, making this the lowest grossing Paranormal Activity film thus far, I believe. Or I could be wrong. Wait, let me check the first one real quick. Hold on a second. Oh, no, yeah, even then. Yeah, Paranormal Activity 4 is the lowest grossing Paranormal Activity film up to this point. It shows. So, my personal history for these movies, Paranormal Activity 3 in particular, I do have a pretty big connection to because technically, Paranormal Activity 3 was the first of the franchise that I ever saw in full. I saw snippets of the first 2 on TV, but a few months after that, occurred, I was at my mom's house during the summer, and one morning I woke up and went on my computer, and we had Netflix at the time, so I was just cruising through Netflix to see what horror movies they had, and at the time, lo and behold, there just so happened to be Paranormal Activity 3. So I did a little bit of research on it because I generally don't like to start franchises in the middle of such, like starting with a second movie or a fourth movie or what have you. But upon learning that this was a prequel, I figured I'd be okay with checking this movie out because it's technically the first part of the series. So I was like, okay, I'll give this a watch. What the hell? I wouldn't mind watching a scary movie. Excuse me. Oh, my eyes itch. Um, oh, wait, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Ah, that's good. And I watched through the whole thing in one sitting, and I remember really enjoying it. I had seen found footage movies at this point, so I was used to its style, but I was still able to get engrossed in the story, and the movie's scares actually did get to me. Like, it not nearly as strongly as the first film did years later, but this one did kinda get under my skin a little bit, and I remember just really enjoying it. But I didn't watch it again until when I was watching the whole series from beginning to end, when I bought the 5-pack when Ghost Dimension was coming out at my grandparents', and I was excited in checking this one out because I remember watching it from those years ago and being really excited to see this. And I still enjoyed it, but there was a couple things about it that kind of annoyed me, but I still enjoyed it. And up until this point, well, no, let me rephrase that. So I'm going to be saying this guy's name in a later video, but I used to be a big fan of Jeremy Johns. And um well, some of my favorites of his videos were his reviews of the Paranormal Activity movies. And not to wear his influence on his sleeve, I don't try to do this anymore, but looking back, up and well, actually, no, even for the fourth movie, too, up until this point, I have agreed with all of his opinions, or like my opinions have lined up with his. Like, he and I both really enjoy the first movie, and we both like the second movie, but we just have a couple problems with it. Now, Jeremy's opinion of Paranormal Activity 3 is that it's a mixed bag. Yeah, I would agree too. This is a mixed bag movie for myself. It's not like overwhelmingly bad. It's not overwhelmingly great either. It is a good prequel. It is a good movie, but there's just some things about it. One aspect in particular. Oh, thank you. This is a Cobra Kai shirt. Ironically, I don't even like the show, but I have the shirt. Um, there's one thing about Paranormal Activity 3 in particular that really gets on my nerves. But I do think this is a pretty decent movie. Um, it's a good one. Not great, but it's good. As for part 4, I remember a lot of the hype that was surrounding this movie when it was coming out. Like, I remember watching ads on YouTube for this, saying, like the trailer saying, Paranormal Activity 4 is the scariest movie of the year. The final 10 minutes are utterly nerve shredding. That in particular, utterly nerve shredding. And that kind of interested me, but even still, I just really wasn't interested in seeing this. Um, and as far as Jeremy John's opinion of this, I don't quite remember a lot of his thoughts, except for this. What better could you ask for, except for a movie that has a even remote shred of relevance? Yeah, so there's an interesting parallel with me, I find. This is the third example where I've encountered a franchise where its fourth film feels disconnected from the rest of its franchise. Looking at you, Alien Resurrection. And Trevor Boy has made me realize that, yes, Alien Resurrection does feel very disconnected from the rest of the Alien films. And I have stated that I feel a similar feeling for Tremors 4, it feeling very isolated and disconnected from the rest of the series. Paranormal Activity 4, I definitely have to say, this really should not have been a part of the franchise. Um, Supposedly, Paranormal Activity 4 is seen as being the really bad one in the Paranormal Activity franchise. I don't agree with this opinion, but so I know that this was written by Christopher Landon, but I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that this was an unrelated script for a generic found footage horror film that had a little bit of rewrites given to it here and there to make it a part of the Paranormal Activity franchise. Because outside of the appearance of um, Katie Featherston, this movie feels very disconnected from the rest of the franchise in a very off-putting and just pointless fashion. This is definitely the most pointless installment of the Paranormal Activity movies, in my opinion. And so far, I've yet to rewatch Ghost Dimension, but I'm sure that's going to be quite a doozy for myself when I get around to seeing it. But hands down, this has been my least favorite of the Paranormal Activity movies so far. Again, I don't think this is a terrible movie, but it's not good either. It's just kind of lame, unfortunately. And the fact that this is the lowest grossing Paranormal Activity movie um, to date so far, I think it definitely shows. Yeah, that sucks. Hmm. Oh, okay. Alrighty, so we're gonna go through the plots of both of these movies real quick. Okay, yeah. So for Paranormal Activity 3, in March of 2005, Katie delivers a box of old videotapes to her pregnant sister Christy Ray and her husband Daniel, which holds footage of young Katie and Christy with their mother Julie and her boyfriend Dennis. A year later, Christy and Daniel's house is ransacked and the tapes are missing. Reusing a little bit of footage from the beginning of Paranormal Activity 2 and adding some more footage that was previously unseen, giving more context to that break in. The VHS footage filmed in 1988 makes up the rest of the film. A young Katie and Christy are living with their mother Julie and her boyfriend Dennis as their father left them for reasons unknown, or he was killed. Dennis notices that since Christie's imaginary friend Toby appeared, strange things have been happening through the house. After filming an earthquake in the couple's bedroom after attempting to make a sex tape, Dennis notices that, or hang on, no, excuse me. And noticing an invisible figure in the footage, Dennis is advised by his friend Randy to place cameras throughout the house. Dennis and Julie hire a babysitter named Lisa to watch the kids, but she becomes desperate to leave due to several terrifying incidents. The following night, Christy tells Toby they're not friends anymore. Dennis discovers a strange symbol in the girl's closet and finds the same symbol in a book about demonology. When Christy becomes mysteriously ill, Julie and Dennis take her to the hospital. When Katie is left home with Randy, they are attacked by a black figure which violently flings furniture across the room and scratches Andy on his torso. This is definitely when the series starts to get a lot more violent. When Julie and Dennis return home, he informs her that the symbol belonged to a witch's coven that brainwashed girls of childbearing age into having sons, then forcing them to give up their sons um, and forget everything afterwards. But Julie dismisses his claim. This laying the seeds for Paranormal Activity 5. The demon harms Katie until Christy agrees to do what it asks. She asks her mother to take them to her grandmother Lois's house in Moore Park, California, and Julie agrees after encountering frightening activity herself. I'll talk about that. That's probably the biggest scare in the movie. At 1 a.m. in Moore Park, Julie and Dennis are awoken by loud disturbances, and Julie goes to investigate. When she fails to return, Dennis goes to look for her. He finds occult imagery on the walls, including the symbol from the door from the girl's room, and discovers several women, including Lois, dressed in black. He flees back to the house with the women in pursuit and finds Julie's limp body levitating above the ground before it is thrown at Dennis. Dennis hides with Christy in a closet before walking into the kitchen, where Dennis from a window sees the women circling around a bonfire outside. Katie and Lois, in the same room as Julie's body, kill Dennis. Lois then beckons to Christy and Katie and tells them to get ready. Before they head upstairs, Christy calls for Toby, and growling sounds are heard upstairs until the camera cuts out and the film ends on a very bleak note. I think this is no, hang on. Is this the highest grossing movie so far? Well, that doesn't matter. Hang on. Let me see what 2 did. Okay, no. Okay, yeah. So, real quick, Paranormal Activity 3 is also the highest grossing Paranormal Activity film thus far. As for the plot to Paranormal Activity 4, on October 9th, 2006, Christy Ray and her husband Daniel were killed by her demon possessed sister Katie and then abducts Christy's 1 year old son Hunter. A quick recap of the second movie, showing that this movie is a direct continuation of the second film. The police are still unable to find Katie and Hunter. 5 years later, in November of 2011, Alex Nelson is living in a wealthy suburb of Henderson, Nevada, with her father Doug, mother Holly, and little brother Wyatt. Alex records footage with a laptop webcam before Alex and her best friend Ben set up cameras all over the house after many not really strange occurrences, which escalate into several cars parked outside a neighbor's house and objects such as chandeliers, kitchen knives, the family car, and garage doors becoming sentient. The neighbor has a son, Robbie, who stays at the Nelsons' home while his mother is hospitalized. Wyatt tells Alex about Robbie's imaginary friend, Toby, and Alex finds Robbie in a closet saying he doesn't like you watching us. Wyatt also tells Alex and Ben about meeting him, revealing a green symbol on his back identical to an ancient Hittite symbol. Hittite. What's that? I have no idea. One that would prepare a victim for demonic possession. They learned that the possession ritual requires a virgin blood sacrifice. It is then revealed that Robbie's mother is actually Katie from the first two movies. Wyatt is told by her that he and Robbie were adopted and that his other family needs him back. He argues with an unseen, unheard presence about his real name, declaring, I am not Hunter. As the month progresses, there are even more odd activities, such as Wyatt going in a trance and levitating Alex. One night, a possessed Katie sneaks into the house and tells Wyatt she'll wait until she is ready. Alex tries to show her parents the footage, but it has been mysteriously, conveniently erased. The next day, while Doug and Alex are out, two deaths occur at the home. Holly is violently thrown against the ceiling, and Ben, visiting the home to inform Alex about the symbol's relation to a coven, has his neck twisted 180 million degrees by Katie. Alex and Doug arrive home at night after dinner, and Doug goes next door, believing he saw Holly and Wyatt. Alex finds Ben's body in the house and is suddenly knocked down by a force and dragged. She flees to Katie's home and finds Doug being dragged out of sight. She searches for him when she hears Wyatt's voice before a demonic Katie runs towards her in a hallway. Alex escapes from Katie by jumping through a window in the yard, where she finds Wyatt and dozens of women walking towards her. She flees, but Katie lunges at her with demon face. The camera falls to the ground and the footage is cut off, and Alex was killed. Very abruptly and anticlimactically ending the movie, and my nose refuses to stop itching right now. So, how about these plots? Ooh, hold on. Well, the third movie is more satisfying. The third movie functions much more well as a prequel. It just functions better as a paranormal activity film. It does feel very familiar, and it is very convincing as showing a found footage movie being done in the late 80s, but it also conveys well the origin, or not really the origins, but exploring more of what went on during Katie and Christie's childhood dealing with paranormal activity, as well as laying even more seeds for the rest of the franchise to take advantage of, namely the Coven of Witches and Katie and Christie's relationship with the demon Toby. So it works as a prequel. There's just some things about it that kind of frustrate me. And there's a couple cliches that at this point are starting to get just a little old. Paranormal Activity 4, had this not been a Paranormal Activity movie, it would have been watchable, or not. No, the movie is watchable, but the movie would have been okay, but just kind of generic. But because the Paranormal Activity name is attached to this movie feels very lazy, and it feels like a rights obligations movie. It feels very much like the studio was about to lose the rights to Paranormal Activity, and they just called up the same directors from last time and just said, "Here, take this script and make it into a Paranormal Activity movie." It feels like the two directors, Juiced and Shulman, it feels like those two put all of their eggs in the third movie's basket. Like that's the movie they really wanted to make. And with this movie, they purely just did it for contractual obligations reasons. Um, because this movie just feels very, again, it feels very isolated. It feels very disconnected. It doesn't really feel like a Paranormal Activity movie. It just feels like a generic found footage movie. And because the Paranormal Activity series is like the cream of the crop when it comes to found footage movies, for the movie to be this generic, it's just almost kind of insulting. And especially with, I have my issues with the third movie, but the third Paranormal Activity movie is a pretty damn solid film. And then, and so that we can see that these two directors, they have some talent. And then to see them do this movie, it just kind of feels out of left field. Like, were you guys just hearts just not in this, or was just something that studios and you guys thought would take off more, but it didn't? And it's odd because I've heard some behind the scenes stuff that um the two directors were trying to treat this movie kind of like a stepping stones movie, because I have heard that one of the script ideas for a fifth Paranormal Activity movie, it would have been a sequel to this film, and it would have revealed that Alex actually did not die at the end of this movie, and it would have been she would have been the main character again, and it would have followed her adventures and figuring out what happened to her family. I mean, that would have been a nice movie to see, because Alex is a likable character, but that didn't come to be. And apparently, there are some questions that were asked by the directors, and they answered with the dreaded, "We'll explore that in another movie" answer. But they never got to make another movie because the next movie, I believe, was directed by Christopher Landon himself, and it went in a completely different direction. And also, so I'm just gonna give brief spoilers for the rest of the series. To my knowledge, at least, this movie is never referenced again. The next two, well, technically the next three movies, but specifically the next two, they all deal with different families. And as far as I know, there's no mention or reference or anything for that matter of Paranormal Activity 4 that's utilized in the next two movies. So that even more so makes this movie feel very disconnected and isolated. So yeah, this movie just kind of doesn't work for me. It doesn't work as a Paranormal Activity film, which is kind of disappointing, because this is actually the one that I was kind of excited to check out again, because I have heard that so many people just shit all over this movie and say it's the worst of the series. It's not. It's not a terrible movie by any means, but it's just not a great Paranormal Activity film. Um so yeah, that kind of paints my opinion of this movie pretty harshly so far. But oh my god, my nose. So with all that being said, let us get into the plot of Paranormal Activity 3. I have 6 pros and 5 cons, and they're all a bit minor. So, well, no, sort of. Pros number 1 and 2 kind of go into each other. Hold on. Pro number one, I think this is a good prequel. And pro number two, is the great 80s aesthetic. This movie again does serve very well as a prequel. It does a good job of exploring prior events to the first two films and showcasing another part of the story that took place almost 2 decades prior. It's very good at showing some of the origins of the main characters and laying some more groundwork for the rest of the series. It doesn't conflict with any of the franchise's previous lore, at least to my knowledge, and it shows us a different side of two characters that we grow attached to in the first two films. It's very convincing, it's very well written, and it's very well done as a prequel, in my opinion. Okay, hang on. I think I need to blow my nose. Again. Excuse me. Oh, that's better. Okay. And pro number two is the great 80s aesthetic. Yeah, this movie, I think, is very convincingly so. Uh, yeah, VHS tapes and VHS cameras were a thing back in 1988, and they were a bit more readily available, but they were still fairly expensive. And I do like that they do explain in this movie because, obviously digital video wasn't a thing back then, and there was no such thing as recording hours upon hours upon hours of footage with just one camera. Sorry. Um, they explained that the cameras in this movie, they can record 6 hours of footage before you have to switch out the tapes. I do think that still might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm not so familiar with 80s technology. But it is plausible and it's convincing enough so as you don't think, wait, how the hell are they able to record so much footage back in the 80s? I think they justify it pretty well and explain it pretty well, so I buy it. But overall, how this movie looks, it's very convincing as being set in the 1980s. All the clothes look appropriate. All the hair looks appropriate. The houses look very 80s. Um, it just looks like a movie set in the 1980s in a very kind of subtle but still convincing enough way. So that's really good. Props to the filmmakers. Pro number three is that there are some good lore expanding scenes in this. There's a little bit more context added to what is up with the demons and paranormal activity. And then we have the introduction of a coven of witches and a cult being tied to this demon. I can't remember the name of this cult. I think that's revealed in the next movie, but um I think it's a pretty interesting concept of having a coven of witches um be the cause for people making a deal with demons, or not the cause but the root of people making a deal with demons. And yeah, it's a witch's coven that brainwashes girls into having boys and then forcing them to give up those kids. I think it's fascinating. It's subtle. I think the next movie explains more about that. And it is creepy. Like covens of witches, I don't think is something that's utilized very common in supernatural movies, at least not to my knowledge. So this feels very appropriate, and I think it fits in with the lore and the mythology pretty well, in my opinion. And yeah, it has that creepy edge to it. Um, because cults are always, in my opinion at least, I think cults are pretty fascinating and they're pretty spooky in concept. So yeah, I think it's good. Oh my god, my nose. Pro number 3, there are some decent moments of suspense in this film, in my opinion. One camera that they have in this movie that I think gives the best suspense. So the main guy of this movie, Dennis, he he takes a fan that turns back and forth. He removes the fan, so he just has the motor and piece that goes back and forth. He attaches a video camera to that thing because they didn't have wide angle lenses back then. So this compensates for because he puts it in the living room, at a corner that covers the living room, and slowly pans over to the kitchen slash dining room, and it just goes back and forth so it can cover both areas. And this is the part of the house that I think gets the most screen time, but I think this is the part of the house where the suspense is at its best. There's some decent moments of suspense in Katie and Christie's room too, but the kitchen in particular is where I think the suspense is at its best. They do a nice trick in this movie of kind of forcing you to be patient and looking back and forth between two points of view with the camera because the camera pans back about this slow before it goes back and forth. And they do this thing where when there's something in particular that you need to focus on, once it goes over to um one point of the house where like one example, there's a scene where the babysitter, no, not the babysitter, where Julie is having a midnight snack. She's in the kitchen, she's chomping away at her food, and then the camera pans back over to the living room, and above the front door, you see a chandelier light that starts to slowly illuminate, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. Then the camera pans back over to Julie, and she's just completely oblivious to what's going on. And then all of a sudden, you hear this loud shattering noise. And then the camera slowly pans back over. You see Julie hop over, you see Dennis come over, and you see them investigate what the hell that was. They find the shattered chandelier. It had fallen and shattered on the ground. Um, so this will just lead me into this too. Pro number 5 is there are some good scares in this movie. They're mostly jump scares, but I think they're pretty effective. The shattering chandelier is a good one too. Um, But going back to the suspense too, there still are a lot of long, quiet takes where something subtle happens in the background and it kind of makes you tense up and dread what the hell's going to come next. So there's another scare when the babysitter is here. She's sitting, oh, there's two of them actually. So she's sitting in the dining room. So the camera was panned over to the living room, and the she and the kids have been playing like ghost sheet games. You know, the typical person putting a sheet over their head and going "Ooh" like a ghost. So she and the kids were playing games with that not too long before. But she's in the dining room after she had just put the kids to bed. So the camera pans over to the living room, and there's a small figure with a sheet over its head. And that kinda makes the audience sorta tense up a little bit. Then the camera slowly pans back over, and once the figure is out of sight, it starts to pan back over to the babysitter, and the figure is right behind her. But then right before the babysitter turns around, whatever was under the sheet disappears, and the sheet crumples onto itself. Now she turns around and she doesn't see what's going on, but by the time the camera pans back around to the babysitter, she's picking up the sheet and folding it, and she's like looking like, what the hell? So she goes up into the girl's bedroom because it's upstairs to check on him. She hears like a loud, or not a loud, but she hears like a thumping in the corner. So she goes over to, so behind the camera is a small, like little cubby hole that's for storage. And this is right next to the camera off screen. And this is where the noises are coming from. So the babysitter, she slowly starts to like creep up towards the camera. She's looking like, what the hell's going on here? And then an invisible force just kind of slams against her chest and it makes her go like backwards, like, whoa, what the fuck? It's an effective jump scare, and the look on the actress's face is pretty convincing that she was obviously freaked the fuck out. And aside from the ending, the best scare in the movie, in my opinion, is when Julie gets convinced of the paranormal activity. She is just, having a nonchalant conversation with Dennis and the girls. She's just going blah 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 blah. So the camera focuses on the dining room, and you see there's like a table, chairs, dishes, knickknacks all over the place, all over the kitchen and dining room. So the camera pans back over, and then we see Julie walk down the stairs, and she's walking around, following the camera. Then she stops, and as the camera focuses on the dining room, it's completely empty. There's nothing. None of the stuff that was there before is there. And then Julie slowly is like walking up, like, what? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, everything, including the kitchen sink, just comes crashing down out of nowhere. And it's just a big, long, loud, bombastic explosion of shit. And Julie's obviously just freaked the fuck out. And she's like, girls, Dennis, it's time to leave. Um, it's I almost fell backwards in my chair when I saw this movie for the first time at my mom's place. It was actually that point in time because I like was like, ah, I went like that and I actually woke up my parents. It was okay. It was 11:30 in the morning, so who cares? So the scares are pretty decent. You can tell that they're just starting to rely more on jump scares for the actual terror of the film. But I still think this is, again, I haven't seen the next movie in a long time, but I feel like this is the last time where the filmmakers were actively trying to have a balance of suspense and good jump scares. And I still think it's pretty effective here. Um and speaking of which, so the last pro is the ending, I think, in typical paranormal activity fashion, is effectively bleak. So, yeah, it pretty much does play out how Wikipedia lists it. Dennis and Julie are awoken in the middle of the night, um, and they hear like these noises off in the background. Julie goes to check it out, but after like 5 or 10 minutes, um, by the way, real quick, I should mention this is like a real creepy real life moment. So I watched Paranormal Activity 3 a couple nights ago, and there's a point in time, I think it is when it was the babysitter ghost sheet scene. That happened at no, actually no, that wasn't it. Oh, it was the exploding chandelier bit. In the movie, that was taking place at 1:38 in the morning. And I was watching that scene with Meadow at 1:38 in the morning. We didn't have any paranormal activity occur, thankfully, but that kind of skeeved me out just a little bit. I was like, "Oh my god, wow, I'm actually syncing up with the movie I'm watching." Spooky. But yeah, the movie's ending. Julie goes to investigate, And like 5 minutes later, she has it returned. So Dennis grabs his camera and goes out there. There's a long, quiet take where Dennis is looking around the house, looking for Julie and the girls. He keeps calling out for them, but there's nothing. It's completely silent. Not even a mouse fart in the entire house. And so he's just looking around the house. He goes outside to go to the garage. He opens the door and then he clicks his light on, and it's a good jump scare because there's like 5 or 6 women, old ladies in the garage. It was like, oh, and then he just turns around and starts hightailing because all of these chicks look very grim and mean. So he gets in the house. He starts hearing these noises throughout the house. He finds Christy and hides in a closet, and there's a like loud thumping noises and kind of growling noises outside the door. But then they stop, and um well, beforehand, yeah, he got smothered by Julie's dead body levitating at the top of the stairs. But Katie finds her mom's dead body. So Dennis goes to, like, console her and tell her, "Hey, we got to get out of here." But she turns around and she's got evil demon face. And then there's this demonic force that just blasts him on his back. So he's slowly crawling and pulling himself along because he's obviously hurting in pain. And then Lois shows up with this cold, evil look on her face. And then you hear this loud rumbling noise, and Dennis gets his back broken clean in half. And there's like a loud cracking sound. So you're just like, oh, damn. And then Lois collects her 2 granddaughters, then goes upstairs as Toby follows. End of movie. Similar to the first movie, it has a very bleak, hopeless feel that just leaves you on a bitter, dour note. But I think it's effective. Probably the last time that the series does this in a good way. As for the cons for Paranormal Activity 3, con number one is the cast of this movie is just very standard. I have it here as standard characters. The movie's cast, aside from Katie and Christy, the two little actresses do a really good job playing a young Katie and Christy, and they're very convincing as a young Katie and Christy. But overall, the characters, with the exception of one, are just very standard. They're just here to fill out a human cast for a horror film just to be killed off. They're not unlikable, but they're not super likable or memorable either. They're just there. But this will lead me into con number two, Julie. She's like Mika in David. Kind of. She's not as unlikable as David, but I think she is a little more annoying than Mika, only because she just completely refuses to believe any of the evidence that Dennis and Katie and Christy are trying to show Julie. And she's just constantly dismissing them and constantly um, just talking down to them, saying, "No, this isn't real. No, this isn't real. No, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing that." She's just very defiant throughout most of the movie. And it's only until, kind of like with David, irrefutable evidence of demons is just hitting her right between the eyes does she believe. But even then, she's still just kind of unlikable and bitchy towards Dennis and her daughters. It's just kind of off-putting for me. And it kind of sucks too because Julie started out as a fairly likable character, but she soon just devolved into that cliche that the first two movies have. And by this point, Julie's type of character is getting old. I actually think at this point it is old. And it's even worse in the next movie. Um, Con number 3 is the lack of scares. The kitchen scene, the ghost sheet, and the babysitter getting shoved. Oh, and this is a good scare too. Katie and Christy are chasing each other around the house until Katie, in their bedroom, she bumps into an invisible force. But the actress playing her is doing a good job of showing, like, what, what, and then all of a sudden, um, an invisible hand grabs her by her hair and yanks her up into the air. Um, it was very shocking to me at the time when I first saw this movie, and it still kind of is because you wouldn't expect something that nasty and mean to be done to a 8-year-old little girl, but yeah, it's pretty surprising. But aside from all those scenes and the ending, the rest of the movie, it's kind of a similar problem with the second movie. There's not a whole lot of scary stuff that happens. And the stuff that does happen, it's kind of more of the same. And by this point, it's lost its luster, unfortunately. Um it's just a little annoying. By the third film in a series, even if this is a prequel, you'd expect things at this point to be a bit more elaborate and more spectacular, but it's not, sadly. It's just more of the same, which at this point, it's just worn out its welcome. But these last two cons I have to do with each other. I think this movie is way too short, and I think this movie feels rushed. This movie, not counting credits, is only an hour and 18 minutes long. I think this is the shortest of the whole series. And because it's so short, it also feels very rushed because of the lack of scares. Um, Thankfully, the ending doesn't feel rushed, but the whole movie beforehand, it just feels, and there's so many jump cuts in the first 2/3 of this movie. There's a lot of jump cuts, and there's a lot of jumping from night to night. It goes night 1, night 3, night 7, night 11, so on and so forth. There's none of that, no more of that gradual easing into the scares and gradually escalating them more and more and more. It just feels so rushed. And they're just like constantly throwing shit at you as the movie goes on. It's just kinda lame, and by the end of it, I just felt kind of like, "That's it? For a prequel and a 3rd movie, that's all you can give us?" And it's odd because I stated earlier, it feels like the directors threw more of their eggs into this basket, and yet it's so short, and ironically too, the 4th movie, I keep forgetting I'm doing a double feature. Excuse me. The 4th movie, I think, is the longest of the series so far. Yet, or no, the second movie is, but this one's like 10 minutes longer than this. So, what the hell's the deal? Excuse me. But yeah. Moving on to Paranormal Activity 4, I have only 3 pros for this movie. Pro number 1, I'm actually going to start with the most minor, is the cool Xbox Connect idea. They use the Xbox Connect as a plot device in this movie. For those who don't know, the Xbox Connect was a add-on system to the Xbox console. I think, or yeah, at the time around 2012. Um, it was like a fitness game thing. It was kind of like the Wii, but with the Connect because it shot out a laser grid system. It tracked your entire body's movement, so you could do dance games and you could do sports games using the Connect. It was fun, but it was very short-lived. I think it only lasted maybe a year, 2 years. Um, but still, I do think it's a cool idea because at night uses night vision and you can see the entire laser grid being shot out in the entire living room. And there's a couple cool scares, or not cool scares, but there's a couple cool things that are captured on the Connect. In particular, two scenes when Wyatt and Robbie are awake in the middle of the night chasing around each other. There's a scene when, as the kids get caught, hold on, sorry. Okay. Yeah, back to 4. Yeah, the connect idea. As the kids are caught, um, what you think is one kid chasing another, as soon as the lights turn on, you see a figure, and that figure disappears. And that's when you realize, oh, there's 3 there, but one of them was a ghost. And there's a similar scene that happens later when Wyatt is talking to the unseen entity saying, "No, my name is Wyatt. It's not Hunter. My name is Wyatt." You see a child-sized figure materialize out of nowhere and start slowly walking behind him. And then the lights turn on because Wyatt is very loud at this point, and his dad comes down to get him. So they're like, "What the hell are you doing, bud?" And it's kind of like a spooky, "ooh shit, ooh shit, ooh shit," and then it's gone. And then you're just like, "Wait, wait, where'd it go? What?" Well, that itself's kind of a problem with this movie because you end up asking the question of what a lot. Um, Still, it's a cool concept, but unfortunately, they just don't do very much with it. Um, Pro number 2 is there are some funny moments in this movie. Nothing like split your guts open funny, but it's more just like a couple just family jokes and just a fun kind of neighborly family dynamic that's going on in the first half. So Alex and Ben are having a Halloween party at her parents' place, and there's one scene when Doug is stopping by. I guess he's gonna like go hang out with friends or go to a bar, and then he looks at Ben and say, "You be good. I own a gun." I find that to be kind of amusing because I can relate to that. Um, there's also a scene during that same Halloween party. Ben, dressed up as a cowboy, he goes to sit down next to the family cat, and he's like, "So, is there anything that you can tell me about Alex?" As he's trying to open up a piece of candy, and he keeps talking. The cat just walks away, like saying, "Fuck you, I'm out." And he looks over, he's like, "Really?" um, Probably the funniest scene in the movie too is when they're discussing the cult needing a virgin to sacrifice. Ben looks over at Alex and says, "You're fucked. You're fucked too." "No, I'm not. 4 times with 3 times with 4 girls. Sup?" Typical teenage lying about getting laid bullshit, but it's funny. So I may as well talk about this. The highlight of the movie, in my opinion, pro number 3, is Alex and Ben themselves. These two are very fun to watch. They have kind of a cute relationship. They're friends. They're not dating, but they do have a attraction to each other, and they're obviously very good friends. And Ben is obviously very close to Alex's parents in a good way. Like he can just come and go from their house as he pleases, help himself to their food, just hangs out, talks shit, and just has a fun time with Alex's family. And it's obvious that Alex and Ben have a very close friendship slash wannabe relationship, but they're cute together. I totally ship those two. Just a shame they both die. Shit. But they're the highlight of the movie, in my opinion. They're both very likable. They're funny. The relationship is believable. It's also kind of cute. Yeah, they're the highlights of this movie. And that's all that she wrote for prose for part 4. I have I have 8 cons for Paranormal Activity 4. Con number 1 is that Alex's parents, Doug and Holly, are extremely unlikable. Holly more so. She is also the type of character that's just very dismissive and doesn't want to listen to any of the paranormal activity that's going on. She's just like, nope, 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 nope. This is not happening. Nope. I don't want to hear it. Don't want to talk about it. I don't believe it. But to new levels in this movie, and it's even more annoying in this movie because she's just such a snobby, know-it-all bitch in this movie. Um, which is very frustrating. Doug, not so much. And one part of this movie that they try to turn into some kind of drama is that it's very obvious that Doug and Holly, their marriage is not very good at this point. Doug is always away working, and whenever he tries to connect with his wife, Holly is just like passive aggressively saying, "No, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be with you. I want things to go my way and my way only." But then Doug is just like, "Look, I'm trying here, but you can't just do this shit whenever you want to and expect me to roll over when you say heel." Um, to the point where Doug and Holly get into a big argument when later in the movie, Holly gave Alex one of her sleeping pills, which is not cool. Don't ever do this to your child, even if they're not sleeping. And Doug is just like chewing her a new one, saying, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you do that to our 15-year-old daughter? What the fuck?" Um, but these two are they just suck. They're very unlikable. They're very dismissive and very dense and dumb, and very snobby and bitchy and just stupid. To quote James A. Janice, the parents suck. Yeah, they do. Con number 2 is the lazy writing. I'm mainly referring to the directors treating this movie like a plot hole, or not like a plot. Fuck, like a well, this movie does have a plot hole that I'll talk about later, which that has to do with lazy writing as well. Treating this movie like a stepping stones movie, just planting these seeds in the movie, and then they'll say, "Oh, we're gonna explore that in a later movie," but then they don't because they never got to make another movie. Um, Not quite as bad as like Amazing Spider-Man 2 or anything, but it is among a similar vein where you can tell that the directors were planting these seeds here for the franchise to maybe take advantage of, but they're just leaving the seed there and then moving on with the rest of the movie. Um, like showing, okay, we're gonna plant this here, but then we're just gonna move on. And then they're just going to say, "Oh, we'll explain that in a later movie." It's like Disney Star Wars syndrome. It's just kind of lazy writing. But this is one of the biggest problems that I have with this movie is the Hunter Wyatt plot hole. The movie, the end of the movie. Fuck, I can't talk. Ugh. The end of the second movie clearly shows that Katie kidnaps Hunter. But then this movie jumps forward 5 years later, and pretty late on, the movie reveals that Wyatt is Hunter and he was adopted. But the movie never explains how this happened. How did Katie lose Hunter? How was Hunter adopted? Why was Hunter's name changed? Um, um, where has Katie been all this time? This is just one big giant plot hole that the movie never even remotely attempts to explain. And as far as I know, the rest of the series never explains. Because this doesn't seem like a very logical part of the Coven's plan for Hunter to be taken as the firstborn son. Like, what will they do with him? Would they just sacrifice him? That I mean, I would guess that would probably be their best course of action in order to give the demon what it wants. So, why would Katie kill Hunter's family and then kidnap him and then just give him away to be adopted and then find him 5 years later and then get him ready to be taken by the cult yet again? Like what's the point of this? What's their end game? And why the hell is Katie in this movie in the first place? Feels very pointless. Almost feels just like she was here for contractual obligation reasons, like Sigourney Weaver with Alien Resurrection. And this will just lead me into another con, although I don't know why I have this here because I just summed it up. Con number 4 is the lack of answers, and it really has to do with the lazy writing and the Hunter and Wyatt plot hole. Like, how was he adopted? Why did he leave Katie's possession? Is Katie possessed, or is she under the demon's influence this whole time? And has she been brainwashed by the cult to be just their own Michael Myers? Um, what's going on across the street? What's the deal with Robbie? We know he's adopted, but we also don't know like how old he is, when Katie adopted him. Um, does he see and talk to Toby, or is he possessed and brainwashed too? Like, what the hell's going on with him? This movie just has a real lack of answers, and it has to do with the lazy writing and the Hunter and Wyatt plot hole. Just the directors using this as a stepping stones movie. Oh, we'll explore this in a later movie, but then that never came to be. So this movie poses all these questions, but then they're just never answered. It's very lazy. Um, these next four cons. Con number 5 is the lack of scares, proper scares. There's a lot of very stupid jump scares in this movie, like just somebody very quickly opening a door and just talking to the characters, or the cat will jump onto, because this happens in this movie, the cat will jump onto the counter next to the camera in a sudden manner. Oh, that's a jump scare. Um, there's not really anything that's super scary that happens in this movie. And I'm just gonna immediately say too, this is also the tamest paranormal activity film thus far because there's not any blood. There's nothing super violent that happens except for Ben getting his neck snapped and Holly getting tossed to the roof. Aside from that, there's nothing very violent. There's nothing bloody or fucked up that happens in this. And this also has the lamest scares, in my opinion. It has the biggest lack of scares. There's really no drawn out, lengthy takes to get the audience hooked in this movie. There's just lots of scenes of a whole lot of nothing happening, just long takes where nothing happens. All of the scary and intense stuff is saved for the last 10 minutes. And I got to say that commercial of saying the final 10 minutes are utterly nerve shredding is a lie, because the last con that I have here, or the second to last con, the ending is very underwhelming. Alex goes into the house. She hears disembodied Wyatt. Hold on. She hears disembodied Wyatt. Then she sees Demon Katie running at her. Then she jumps out a window, sees a whole coven of witches. Then she gets stormed by Demon Katie. That's it. The ending is very, very underwhelming in my opinion, and it's just kind of lame. And I remember when I finished the movie, I just said, "Oh, that was lame." So no, the final 10 minutes are not nerve shredding in my opinion. And this movie really boils down to my final con with this movie. Con number 8, this movie's boring. There's not even a fun family dynamic that you can watch and get attached to because the parents are so unlikable. Alex and Ben are fun to watch, but they're not on screen the whole movie. But you also can't carry a whole movie on the shoulders of these two teenage actors. You just can't. Because this is a horror movie. You're supposed to be scared, and it's not scary. It's just a whole lot of nothing happening with a bunch of stupid, very explainable, very underwhelming, and lame jump scares here and there just to make you go jump, and then that's it. And they're not even like loud, boisterous jump scares. They're just something. Oops. There you go. There's a jump scare. Good enough. Um, and yeah, this movie it's just boring. It's not very entertaining. It's not very fun to watch. It's not very engaging. And it's just there, which is another reason why it feels so disconnected and isolated from the rest of the series. It doesn't feel like a Paranormal Activity movie. It feels like a generic found footage haunted house movie that just so happens to have the Paranormal Activity name on it. It doesn't feel connected to the series really in any meaningful way, which is kind of lame. So that'll about do it for this double feature. Paranormal Activity 3 is a fun movie. It's a decent film. It's a good prequel. It's a good 80s found footage movie. But it does have some not glaring problems, except for the fact that it's so rushed. But I would still definitely say it is a mixed bag, but it is an entertaining installment. And I'll be giving it a solid 7 out of 10. As for Paranormal Activity 4, yeah, this has been my least favorite so far. Not a terrible movie by any means, but it's not a great one either. It's just very average and mediocre. Just kind of meh. And I'll be giving it a 3 out of 10. I wasn't a huge, actually, no, I'll give it a 4. I'll be generous and give it a 4 out of 10. But it's just not great, unfortunately. Although Paranormal Activity fans calling it the worst of the series, I think that's a bit of a exaggeration. So I don't agree with that. But that'll do it for this video. Post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And as always, look forward to the next video. And if you set up cameras around your house, make sure your cat can't jump up next to them, because that's a very lame jump scare. I didn't think the cat jump scare was still a thing in 2012, but I guess I'm proven wrong. And I will see you guys in the next video.